All right, so I'm Heidi Moss. I'm an associate naturalist in New Jersey Audubon. Anne is a manager, teacher, naturalist, jack of all trades, does everything at Plainsboro Preserve. And the Plainsboro Library is sponsoring this program, and Sharon is our contact for that. So we already did a presentation on Birdwatching 101, where I crammed everything you need to know about birdwatching into an hour. And I'm just going to, I was sort of hoping there would be different people on this lecture that were attending that may not have attended the first lecture. So I was going to review briefly some of the things that I had gone over on Birdwatching 101. And we will go ahead and do that. And then Anne is going to then continue with all the bird feeding part. So what do you need to watch birds? Obviously, you just need an interest in nature. You need some good observation skills, good binoculars, and good field guides. And people don't realize how important all of those things are. And I just want to show you a couple of binoculars. The prices on binoculars can range from about $100 to about $2,000. And right now, compared to 10, 20 years ago, for $200, you can get a decent binocular and you will get really decent, good looks at birds. So this is an example of Vortex, which is at Dick's Sporting Goods that I found. And then another one is a Nikon, which is at B&H Photo for $276. And another one is Zeiss Terra for $499, and they go up from there. But seriously, you can get a decent pair of binoculars, and you can use binoculars for anything. It's not just for bird watching. If you go down to the shore, it's great for looking out on the ocean when boats go by. If you go to a baseball game, it's great to watch, you know, what's going on in the outfield. And it's just absolutely amazing what you can use binoculars for. You can use them for watching butterflies, looking at insects, and other things in your backyard. It's not just for birds. So the important things that you do need for looking at birds are field guides and apps. As a beginner person, I would always suggest a couple of field guides. One of them is Peterson's Field Guides, and that focuses on the eastern US. And then there's another one called Birds of New Jersey, and this is great with families because it actually goes by color. So you can say, well, I have a bird that's blue and orange, just like on the cover. And you can flip through the book and find it by color. And once you get a little better at things and learn about them, then it's easier than to go use a regular field guide. And then the third choice is Merlin, which is a free app from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And you can look up birds on this app. It gives you range maps. It shows you multiple different pictures of adults and juveniles. And it's really helpful with actual pictures. So how do you ID birds? Many factors come together. What kind of song they're singing, the shape of the body, their wings, the shape of their bill and tail. How do they behave? Do you always see them on the ground? Do you always see them in a tree? Where are you? Are you in the woods? Are you in the city? Are you in a marsh where you would see things like herons? Are you on a beach where you would see those little birds running back and forth to the water? Or are you on a river? And then how does it fly, swim, or wade in the water? Those are all factors that help you identify a bird. And what are good field marks? The color of the bird, does it have an eye stripe? Does it have a ring? Does it have bars on its wing? What kind of pattern is on its tail? So there are many, many things to look at when you're trying to identify a bird. And field guides are organized into families. So you will be able to tell with a little practice that you're looking at, say, a duck. Let's see if here's my little arrow. Can you see that? So the ducks tend to look quite similar. And then you have gulls. Gulls tend to look very similar. You have hawks. Hawks tend to act in certain ways. And here's a woodpecker. Woodpeckers always seem to perch like this. You have blue jays that tend to be very brightly colored and noisy. You have chickadees, which are, another backyard bird. And then you have robins that are in the thrush family. And you have sparrows. Sparrows are all little brown birds with small chunky beaks. They tend to feed on the ground. And then you have finches, which tend to hang out in groups. That you hardly ever see a finch by itself. And then you have cardinals, which are another family, and they tend to hang out in pairs. And then you have also the warblers, and the warblers are birds that come through in the spring. Many of them nest in the northern United States, and we get to see them in New Jersey during migration. So let's go over some birds that are in your backyard. So woodpeckers are a family of birds that like to drill holes in wood to look for the larvae of insects. And you can see that all these birds tend to perch in the same way. And if you look at the downy on the right here, you will see the tail feathers are sort of long and they have pointed tips, and that helps the bird stay on the tree limb that it's on. Their feet also help. 2 of their toes point forward and 2 point backward. And you can see they have these large bills, and that's for drilling into the wood or stumps or wherever they're looking for food. And then we have sparrows, which we mentioned before. So here we have a song sparrow. Oh, and by the way, all those woodpeckers that I showed you are resident woodpeckers. They live here year round. And the sparrows, this is a song sparrow. This bird lives here year round. Has a very beautiful song, which is how it got its name. And they are very noticeable in suburban backyards. They tend to like backyard habitat. And then these 2 birds, the white-throated sparrow and the junco, are birds that visit our backyard in the winter. They actually nest in the northern part of the US, and they tend to come down to New Jersey for the winter, because obviously it's very, very cold and not a lot of food up in Canada, especially for birds that are seed eaters. So these are always sort of what I grew up calling the snowbirds, typical of people who go south for the winter, so do the birds. So those 2 tend to do that. And then here we have our finches, and the 2 most common finches we have in New Jersey are the house finch on the left with the red. And in this bird, the male and female look differently. So the male house finch is red and the female house finch is sort of dull looking. And the same thing with the goldfinch. The female is not as brightly colored. And obviously that's because the females sit on the nest and they need a little camouflage. The males are the ones that are trying to attract the females. So in the bird world, it's the guys who get all dressed up, not the females. So, and the goldfinch happens to be the state bird of New Jersey. All right, so here's some other backyard birds, and these are all birds that will come to your bird feeders. On the left is the nuthatch, and this is a typical posture for the nuthatch. They are always going down the trees upside down. That is their niche. They look for anything that's any bugs or insects that are in the trees that they can get going down. They will start at the top of a tree, go all the way down. They'll fly to the top of the next tree and go all the way down after that. And then you have a Carolina wren. The Carolina wren does try to stay here all winter. 20 years ago, they were very uncommon in the winter. They've really pushed their range north, and they have really started sort of staying around in New Jersey. They will come in, they will eat the suet. They're not big seed eaters, but they will eat suet from your feeder. And then on the right is the chickadee. And the chickadees and the titmice are just wonderful little birds that will come to your feeder the minute you put out that bird seed. And they're both year-round residents. And then we have the blue jays, as I mentioned before. They're pretty big, they're very colorful, and they're noisy. And they will come to the feeders and chase other birds away, but the other birds are sort of used to it. They just wait for this guy to get his fill, and then they leave and come back. And then you have a mourning dove. This is a ground feeder. And the mourning doves are here also year-round. They will not be able to perch on your bird feeders. They're not very good at perching. They're pretty much a ground feeding bird. And then you have the cardinals, which look at the size of that beak. They are able to really crush the big seeds that are out there. They tend to feed on the ground too, unless you have a platform feeder where they can, the doves and the cardinals tend to really like the platform feeders because they need a solid surface to perch on. So as I talked about before, both the junco and the white-throated sparrow come here from other areas. And just to show you, here's a quick map of the range of the dark-eyed junco. And as you can see, it really does most of its nesting up in Canada and really comes down to New Jersey for the winter. Blue is always winter in terms of New Jersey. And the same is very true of the white-throated sparrow. They tend to nest mostly in Canada. There are some nesting in some northern states, but pretty much in New Jersey, they are a winter visitor. So that's just to show you how you can use the range maps in your field guides to figure out, does your bird belong here in the winter or not? All right, and then here's another example of the cardinal, because the cardinal's a year-round resident. So I just picked this as an example that they are in the eastern part of the US. They have been expanding their range because of bird feeding. They are one of the birds. Cardinals and red-bellied woodpeckers have expanded their range, and they have tied it completely to people putting out food in the winter that helps these birds get through the winter. And this has probably happened, gradually, but over the last 20 years. I grew up in Maryland, and I had an uncle from New Jersey that loved to come visit us at Thanksgiving so he could see the cardinals. There were not cardinals in New Jersey back in the 1960s. So this is an example of how the birds can expand their range. All right, so now Anne, here you go. Why feed birds in winter? And we'll let Anne take it from here.
Thank you, Heidi. So it's really an exciting thing to be feeding the birds through the winter. Some people really worry about, will the birds become dependent on the seed? But let's think about the reasons that we're going to be putting this feed out there. Number one, sometimes there's so much snow on the ground, they can't get to the seed from the natural sources that are out there. The snow can cover, blanket off the seed. Also, there are limited resources, especially with overdevelopment. So helping the birds make it through the tough time of the year is a great reason to continue to feed through the winter. But it's for us too, because when we feed the birds through the winter, we get to see them up close and personal. It gives us better practice with identifying the birds that are there. And let's face it, it's a lot of fun. That's even something I like to do with my own kids, especially when I got that Merlin app, the one that's on the phone for the first time, and I could let my kids look something up on the phone to be bird watching with me. It really did make a new connection for them to nature. It was a lot of fun and we enjoy it a great deal. Next slide, Heidi. What sort of birds will be coming to the food in the winter that you're putting out for seed? Well, some birds will be coming out for those seeds that we were looking at those pictures. You can tell which birds would be coming for the seed depending on the size of their beaks. There are seed eaters that are so recognizable, like the blue jays and the cardinals. You can see that. But then we have some birds that are looking for the proteins and the fats that we would get in suet. Those might be the woodpeckers would be coming for that. And then some birds are only going to be feeding from the ground, like we were mentioning the doves, but also that's where we tend to find a lot of those snowbirds, the juncos, will also be on the ground. So let's take a look at a list of some of the different types of seeds.
This is a little overwhelming.
It is. Now what it has is a list of so many different types of seeds that are available when you go to the store. You might look at all those lists and go, oh gosh, all I really wanted to do was have some birds. But you would want to look and say, well, what's going to attract the most birds? Are you going to buy something that's a blend, or do you just want one rich type of seed? So we can use this chart to compare and look through what birds we're hoping to have come to our feeder and what things we're going to need. Now, there are some birds that are specialists, that you're only going to get bluebirds if you have suet or if you have whole sunflower seeds. They really do like coming in for insects too, if you're going to feed with dried mealworms. That yes, some people actually do offer bugs for the birds through the winter. But then there's some birds that are going to be coming in for, let's say, the suet. So we'll look at what ones could come for suet. Take a look on the list there. If you look at where it says suet cakes, the suet is the rendered fat that comes from the organs around kidneys, mostly. When you're render down that fat, they make them into those suet cakes, and they often will enhance that suet cake with either seed or cracked corn to try and attract more birds, sometimes even fruit that you may be able to bring in Orioles or something else more exciting. So you can see the list. Oh, you can't see my cursor. If you see the list with the pink, that lists all of the birds. There you go. Thank you, Vanna White. There. There's the birds that would be attracted to coming in for the suet. And you'll see the nuthatches are on there, the titmice, but also right down by the bottom there is the woodpeckers. We really want to have that suet if you want to have woodpeckers at your feeders. I enjoy looking at the list of the different things, but I had to include on there squirrels because yes, I have squirrels come to my feeders too. They are sneaky. They get in no matter what I try. So I've just accepted the fact that they're going to be there, and I enjoy watching squirrels too.
That's right. If you can't fight them, so you might as well let them join the party.
We try to fight them. It doesn't work very well. So, okay, let's take a look at what's next. Here's a closer look at some of those different types of seeds. You'll see
All right,
the
I'll be the arrow.
Thank you. The black sunflower, the black sunflower blends will have that sunflower seed. Usually it contains millet also, which is a little less expensive. It has safflower and peanuts in it. Now, if you refer back and forth with the chart that was on the other slide, that one can show us a variety of birds that can be attracted to this particular blend, and it's a good one for us.
Yes.
The next one, you will see that it has the black sunflower and the white millet, but it has a lot of these red kernels. Those are Milo. Not too many birds are attracted to Milo. So I don't get this one. It's not going to attract the birds I'm happy to have at my feeders. So to me, yes, it's less expensive, but it's not drawing in what I want.
Right. This is what you would call a cheap bird seed mix. You would find this a lot of times in grocery stores,
Right.
or pet stores that don't specialize in birds. If you're going to buy mixes, really look for these ingredients. Turn the bag over and look to see what these ingredients are. And Milo is a big no-no. It'll just sit there, it'll kick it out of the feeder, it'll rot on the ground and cause you more problems than you thought.
Exactly. Sometimes there's even times where people will wind up getting those and the birds aren't interested. So it sits in the feeder and can actually cause some problems. You have to empty it out and clean out your feeder. So it's better to have things that would attract the birds more often. Going for that black sunflower, going for that Niger, those are the ones that are really going to draw in the birds. And with the Niger, we're looking at really drawing in those goldfinches are super attracted to it. Many birds will eat it, but this is one that they specifically adore. They will go for that first when it's available. I can't even see the last column because our pictures are over it. Heidi,
Oh no!
that last one for us?
You have to move. Can you move your pictures?
Oh, look at that. I think I can. You're right.
Okay.
Everybody switch left. There we go. Okay, good. So we have one now that has the black sunflower and the striped sunflower, the millet, the safflower, the corn. See how it has so much variety in there? That's kind of nice. It might attract many more birds. But again, we're looking at those blends and reading on the lists, what birds are you trying to attract to your feeders? If we go back and forth between that other slide, you can compare what type of seed will bring in what type of birds that you'd like to see.
And that list that Anne has put together is also available online on different bird watching sites or bird seed sites. Wild Bird, like Wild Bird Unlimited, that sells these kind of seeds. They do have lists of the different kinds of seeds, but hers is color coded, which is even better.
That was because I liked it. It was even in rainbow order. Roy G. Bibb, if anybody knows.
Oh, I'm impressed.
Big nerd. Sorry, love it.
Okay, next slide.
Yes, please. So here we can take a look at that. There's so many different types of feeders for what type of bird you'd like to attract. In the center, you'll see the most common feeders that we're going to be hosting. When you have them at your house, you'll fill those nice tube feeders. You'll see that it's going to attract a variety of birds. You fill them, you can empty it out every few weeks, especially if you have a lot of activity going on at your feeders. It's best to make sure it empties all the way, give it a good scrubbing out, let it dry before you refill it again. We want to make sure that there's no contagions being spread from bird to bird. If you If you have a feeder that's out in the rain, it can also start to have some of that seed grow inside. So make sure you're cleaning out those beautiful tube feeders. Up in the right corner, you'll see there's a nice little house feeder that the roof lifts up and the seed slides in. But attached to the side of it, there's those suet feeders that the woodpeckers adore. This particular feeder setup, it had suet feeders at 2 different spots on the same post, and it attracted so many different woodpeckers, including that giant pileated woodpecker over to the right. You'll see Heidi did mention they have those little points on the tip of their tail that they use to stabilize themselves as they're grabbing onto a tree trunk. This particular suet feeder on the far right, it has a base at the bottom of it so that the bird can push its tail against it and hold himself stabilized as it's feeding. It was actually pretty exciting watching those birds. I was happy. Down at the bottom on the right, you see a platform feeder. This platform feeder can be used in a couple of different ways. This one we have located on the ground, and sometimes you can even use chains to suspend this one from a pole or a tree. Those platform feeders can feed the things like the blue jays, things that will come to the tube feeders, but it's also great for the birds that would be ground feeders. You can have the doves can sit inside these platform feeders. You can also have the cardinals coming in. I believe in the back on this picture, there's little white-throated sparrow
yeah, right
down
there.
in the background. They are just so cute. I love hearing them sing. That's another way to recognize those birds is listening for their song, because when these guys start, they sing the little song, Sweet, Sweet Canada. Oh, I can't whistle, my mouth is too dry. You hear the sweet, sweet Canada, 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 and that's a way to recognize those birds are outside. And that's a way to recognize Anne's gonna be running to the window to go watch them, because I love them. Yeah, really. So you can find those birds are also another one that are going to be close to the ground. To the far left, there's a few special feeders. The bottom left, you see the blue feeder has a bluebird perched on it. That particular feeder, we have 2 dishes. Those 2 dishes have 2 different things. One of them is filled with dried mealworms. The one beside it is filled with water. Now we fill it with water because as they're eating dried mealworms, we don't want that to become compacted inside the bird. So they have to have water to consume with it. So we put it side by side, and it's great because we saw not only bluebirds enjoying those snacks, all sorts of different insectivore birds were coming up and enjoying it too. We saw wrens coming over for a sweet little treat, and it's kind of happy when I see birds, I'm watching them eating. I'll go buy another bag of worms. I don't care that it's not just the bluebirds eating. I put it there for the bluebirds. As you can see, there's a bluebird box right behind it, but when other birds want to feast, I'm inviting them all. And then up one more, the red feeder. That one is a real popular one through the summer. It's not as great through the winter because that one is specifically for the hummingbirds. Those can be up right now. We do make a nectar solution that we put inside. It's 4 parts of water to 1 part of sugar. So I boil water on the stove. I'll boil 4 cups of water, add 1 cup of sugar to it, stir it, let it cool, and then I put it into mason jars. And when I store that in the refrigerator, it's good for a week or 2, so long as it's nice and cool, but I keep it outside as I'm filling my feeders. I'll make sure that I'm changing and cleaning those feeders frequently. I don't want to make those hummingbirds sick. I love them so much. Soon, I'll be taking down my hummingbird feeders because the hummingbirds are going to be migrating south for the winter. So when they get going, I'll take that down, I'll scrub it, I'll store it away for the winter. And people always ask me, when do you put it back up? Tax day.
Sorry about that.
Tax day. That's okay. Tax day is when you put your hummingbird feeders up, right? So you tell yourself, file your taxes, fill your feeders. That's the way to remember when to put them up. Is it early? Yeah, it's early, but some of those male migrating hummingbirds are coming through looking for a quick treat to keep them sustained on their migration going further north than us. So the ones that will be nesting in New Jersey won't be arriving by April 15th, but the ones migrating through, they'll be coming starting in April. So I get those feeders up by tax day. That's my goal. Before tax day, I'm ready to go.
I like that. I never thought of it that way. People always ask me when to put up the feeders.
Right.
And
File
yeah,
your
that's
taxes
good.
and fill your feeders.
There you go. All right, next.
Next, please.
Uh-oh.
Could you
Doesn't wanna
tell me
go.
again, when we have to put the hummingbird feeder and then take down?
Take them down.
Yeah,
I would take
hummingbird.
the hummingbird feeder. I actually saw a hummingbird today, so they're still coming through. They will come through as late as October. And there's another little phenomenon going on with hummingbirds in that some of the Western hummingbirds are actually doing a sort of southern and then eastern loop in the winter, and people have started seeing rufous hummingbirds that are from California in New Jersey in the winter. And a friend of mine actually had one that stayed the entire winter last year, and he just kept putting out his hummingbird feeder every day. But I would say that if you haven't seen any hummingbirds coming to your feeder, that by Thanksgiving, that's a good time to take them down.
Mm-hmm. That's what I will typically do. I'm usually around Halloween. I've noticed that I've had no visitors coming at all. If I've had no more coming, then I'll start to convince myself that it has to happen, because I don't want to take them down. I love watching the hummingbirds come.
Yeah.
But I also know too, as I look around my yard, none of the host plants are blooming. If the host plants have stopped blooming, typically I think that means most of the birds that would be feeding on it are gone. So when I'm looking to see if there's anything that the hummingbird would sip on, if there's anything there, then the hummingbirds will go for it. On another note, it's kind of nice if you also plant native trees that bloom around the right time, like the Eastern redbud. Eastern redbud does begin to bloom in mid-April, and I saw hummingbirds feeding on that redbud. And that was like right around April 15th. And I'm like, oh, I got to put my feeders up. It reminded me too. So choosing the plants that are a good host for those animals will get them to come to your yard. And then, you know, the feeders being closer to the house, you can see them more frequently. Let's get on to where we should put our feeders.
Okay, I seem to have
Yeah,
frozen.
I just
Oh.
came back from Seattle, and my daughter lives in Seattle, and they put the hummingbird feeder, and it's so pretty. So I'm thinking
yeah,
about
they're
maybe
here in
putting
the
one
summer.
in my
Yeah.
backyard.
All right,
Okay.
I seem to have frozen. Oh, there it goes. Wait a minute, I thought I froze up there. There we go. No, see, isn't that funny? I can't. I think that's the next one. Where to place your
There we
feeders.
go.
There we go.
There we go. We're ready. Okay.
Okay.
You can see as we're placing our feeders out, we try to make sure that there's enough vegetation nearby for the birds to have a place to take cover. Some of the feeders that we have hanging at the Plainsboro Preserve where I work, there are
Which is the middle.
shrubs right nearby, but you can see these that are right in the middle of our backyard. Those trees didn't have, those feeders had no shrubs nearby. So what we did is after the holiday season had ended, we drove around neighborhoods. Actually, Heidi drove around neighborhoods.
My neighborhood.
She
Picked up
drove around the
Christmas
neighborhood
trees.
And she picked up all the discarded Christmas trees that people were putting at the curbs, and we put them out by our feeders. It was really a great idea, because what happened was those birds were not only looking for food, they're also looking for cover from predators. There can still be animals that are out to eat a nice, tasty little bird through the winter. And if they're at the feeder and have nowhere to escape, they're not going to be visiting your feeders as frequently. So
Right.
putting those shrubs nearby did give them a bit of cover. We also want to point out, if you have a hummingbird feeder, don't put that one in the shrubs as much, because there are some predators that can hide in the shrubs. Specifically, my mind goes to praying mantis. They are very cool insects, very stealthy, very fast, and remarkably strong for their size. That I have heard from more than 3 people that have witnessed a hummingbird caught by a praying mantis.
Yeah,
So,
there's pictures of him.
right, don't put your hummingbird feeders near shrubs. Let that stand alone. But the other things, keep them close to the shrubs. And when you're doing that, you have to put 2 things in mind. Either have it distanced from your home so that when birds are coming into the feeders, they're not going to be flying into your windows. Give them a little bit of chance to see where they're going, or have it very close to your windows. Because if you keep those feeders right up next to your home, if they do get startled by a predator swooping in, they take off. They're not going to have much of a running start before they hit that window. It won't injure them as badly. So having it close to the windows, I've even seen people put it right next to the window. And great enough, I've had friends who have their dog, their cat, their children right at the window watching those birds feeding just on the other side of the glass. And the birds have tolerated it because that's where the food is. So
Yes.
it's a fun way to go.
Yeah, the picture on the right of the mourning doves on the table with the feeder is right on the balcony of my condo. And so as you can see, even if you have a condo, you can feed birds and still have them up close. And knock on wood, I have not had any birds fly into the window, and they're pretty happy with what I have there. And also you can see is that red round dish has a black, it's a black lining in it. And that is what I put water in the winter time, because birds need water all year round, doesn't matter whether it's winter or summer. And people say, well, they eat the snow, and well, that really isn't true. They don't really eat the snow. The picture on the left is also, it's taken through my Windows screen, as you can tell. But this is just a pole stand feeder that obviously it snowed the night before and gotten a lot of snow all over it. But you can see how it's distanced enough from the trees that the squirrels won't jump onto it. And yet it's close enough to the trees that the birds would feel safe. If there was an alarm, they would fly into the trees.
Now, take a look at some of these feeders. You'll see that there's some odd shaped things on the posts below it. We'll talk about that in the next slide. If Heidi, you would advance, please. You can see these are baffles. Baffles are things that we put on the feeders to try and stop squirrels, try and stop the raccoons. Some of them are incredibly clever gadgets that can spin a squirrel like a Ferris wheel or going on a little ride, but some of them are very simple. It can be a post. The large black cylinder that's on the right has a hole on the bottom. So if you have your feeder on a post, the squirrel will climb up and he won't be able to get on the outside of that. He'll try and go through the center, but he can't get through the top because there's a cover over the top. So that is one style that cylinder can hang. You can also use the one that's got that little cone shape that's on the far left. The far left, that one goes under the feeder as well. These are baffles that are underneath your feeders.
On your pole, and it rests on this right here.
So those are two baffles for under the feeders, so the squirrels can't climb upward. The two that are in the center, those are baffles to stop the squirrels from jumping onto the feeders. They'll attempt it, and sometimes they can get it, sometimes they don't. The acrobatics are worth it. If they're going to go through that kind of aerodynamic and acrobatic feat to entertain me, they can have some seed. That's fine. That's totally acceptable on my point. But it is interesting that there's a lot of ways you can try to baffle them, to try and slow down the amount of food they'll take. It's not even just about the food. They will chew and destroy your feeders as well. They can chew right through that hard plastic tube that you can see on those tube feeders in the center. The Niger feeders that are created for the little goldfinch that has this tiny little bill, a tiny little beak, as he can reach in and get just a seed at a time, the squirrels will chew a great big hole and the seed just comes pouring right out. So it's really a matter of doing the best we can to fight them for what we want, while they're going to work hard for it too. There's a few other things that some people have to watch out for feeders. If you're in Plainsboro, we don't get this as frequently. If you have family that lives toward northern New Jersey or northwestern New Jersey, they also need to think a little bit about bears. They might want to consider what they're doing for their feeders, because bears will come to bird feeders as well. If you have that situation going on in Plainsboro, we get, a bear will come through once or twice a summer, and that's the time of year you start watching for it. But if you do see bears in your yard, just use extreme caution. Don't ever surprise a bear. I'll tell you what I tell children: when we see bears, we sing happy birthday. Nobody's asking why.
Yeah, you're making noise.
Well, yeah, you have to ask why, because then I get to say it's his birthday.
It's his birthday.
But it's noise. And typically when we're with a group, if somebody starts singing happy birthday, everyone sings along.
True.
So it's a good way to get kids involved in, protecting themselves and being bear aware. I didn't even get to see the one that was in town this summer. I looked for it. I didn't get to see him. But it's another thing that I don't know how to baffle a bear. Do you know how to baffle a bear?
No, there is no such thing.
If they want it, they're getting it.
Yeah. Basically, people who live in bear country do not feed birds during the summer, and they only put out their bird feeders in the winter.
Right. And when they store the seed, they put it in either steel drums, or they keep it in the garage. Still, I would put it in a steel drum, like a garbage can, to keep it in your garage, so you don't get chipmunks and mice that would come in and steal from your seed stash. They'll make their own stash. So it's a good thing to keep your seed covered.
Okay. And last but not least, glasses, yes.
Yeah. Oh yes, feeder watch, feeder watch. And there's so many different things. If you get into enjoying the birds at your feeders, there are different ways you can volunteer to be a part of the projects that people are monitoring, the birds that are coming to their feeders. We do have volunteers that come to the preserve. They'll volunteer for the township to watch the feeders there, but you can do this right at your own home. Heidi, have you done the feeder watch?
I've done it on and off. I know people who do it. You basically, you pick 2 days a week. And on those same 2 days of the week, you pick a certain time, and you watch the birds at your feeders during that time, and you mark down the different birds that you see. And then you basically enter all this information online. Before, it used to be a paper thing and you mailed it in, but now obviously it's all online. And if you sign up for Feeder Watch, they do charge $18. Basically, the feeder watchers are the ones who support the program. And you get instructions on how to watch birds, especially on how to count the birds. So if if you see 2 chickadees and then 10 minutes later you only see 1 chickadee, you don't have 3 chickadees. You keep it at 2 because you keep it at your maximum number that you see at one time. They have these great posters of common backyard birds to help you identify them. And apparently this year they're sending out calendars too.
Nice.
So it's a great family activity, and it's really something. It's good to get the kids watching birds and learning about nature.